If you clicked on this video, you're most likely wanting to know more about the new Dungeons & Dragons book, A Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica. The first thing I can tell you is that it's due to be released in game stores and on D&D Beyond on November 20th of this year. Like with most Dungeons & Dragons books, it will most likely have an online release a few weeks later. To start off, I'm going to give a quick overview of just what Ravnica is, but if you already know, feel free to go ahead and skip ahead. I'll put a link in the comments down below. Ravnica is a popular setting from the card game Magic the Gathering. It first debuted back in 2005 and has been revisited numerous times over the years, both in their products and in their written stories. The most recent product, a set called Guilds of Ravnica, is set to be released just about 1 month before this book is. Ravnica gets its name from its largest and currently only city, which dominates much of the planet's surface. While there used to be many cities on this plane, they all continued to grow until they merged together to form Ravnica. Probably the most notable thing about Ravnica, besides it being a giant planet-spanning city, is that it is comprised of 10 guilds. These guilds are most likely why the plane is so popular among Magic the Gathering players. Each of the 10 guilds on Ravnica have wildly different viewpoints, philosophies, and power distributions. For instance, some of them could be referred to as cults, oligarchies, or bureaucracies, while others are more just a conglomeration of different clans. Guilds are literally a part of everyday life on Ravnica, even for the people that aren't a part of them. While the guilds do hold much of the power on Ravnica, a majority of the people on the plane are not part of any guild. The only thing keeping the peace between these radically different guilds is an enchantment called the Guildpact. Before this enchantment, the guilds were constantly at war with each other, and making life on Ravnica pretty terrible. Just over 10,000 years ago, though, the Guildpact was created and signed by each of the 10 guilds. This was meant to ensure peace by keeping the guilds from meddling in each other's affairs. During Magic's first trip to Ravnica, the Guildpact was broken, allowing the guilds to once again fight amongst each other. While it has recently been renewed, with the new Magic set taking place on Ravnica this fall, there is heavy speculation that the Guildpact will once again be broken. If you want to know more about the Guildpact or any of the guilds themselves, I suggest you reading up on it. I'll put a link in the description down below. Okay, now let's get to all the things we know will be in the book, and one thing we know of that won't. Colors. In Magic, colors are used to denote the kind of philosophies and feelings behind cards. For instance, a black card would focus more on, say, greed or undeath, whereas a white card would focus more on order. While colors were mentioned quite frequently in early drafts of this book, the designers decided to leave them out in the final copy. Instead of focusing on all the different colors, the designers decided to focus more on the philosophies behind the colors. This makes a lot of sense to me. While Magic players would automatically already know what the colors are, to Dungeons & Dragons players, it would just be a bunch of meta information that doesn't really have any bearing on the game. Now on to what we know will be in the book. The first things we know of are just tons and tons of campaign tools that will help you create campaigns centered on Ravnica. Next are character options such as classes, races, and backgrounds. There's supposed to be enough information in this book that you can just pick it up and create a character from scratch. And finally are the monsters. There's supposed to be countless creatures that are new to D&D that DMs will be able to throw at their players. There's supposed to be enough information in this book that you can just pick it up and have everything you need to start a game of Dungeons & Dragons. So, when it comes to campaign tools, they haven't really said much of what's going to be in the book yet. What we do know for sure are adventure hooks that relate to all the different guilds, tables that will help you create new parts of the city and new adventures on the fly, and for the first time, there will even be a map of Ravnica. But, since the city of Ravnica is the size of an entire planet, the map will consist of only the 10th district, where much of Ravnica's story has taken place. While this is everything we know so far, it's pretty much guaranteed that there will be much more. After all, this book is all you need to create campaigns centered on this plane. The things we know most about in this book so far are the character options. The two confirmed races are Minotaur and Centaur, which showed up a few months ago in Unearthed Arcana, a monthly article where the D&D team playtests new material. There are bound to be many more races though, as this book is meant to work as a standalone product. At the very least, I assume it would include humans and elves. Also included might be the 3 sub-races of elves that debuted in Unearthed Arcana somewhat recently. The winged elves would work perfectly as angels for the Boros Legion, the more primal elves would fit in with the Gruul, and the aquatic elves would be right at home in the Simic Combine. Other races I would expect to see are Vidalcan, goblins, and vampires, all of which have shown up in the Planeshift articles by James Wyatt. These articles have been going on for years, and they've already been converting Magic settings into D&D campaigns. We also know that there are going to be a whole slew of new class options to choose from. The two that have been confirmed so far are the Order Domain Cleric and the Circle of Spores Druid that premiered in Unearthed Arcana not too long ago. It wouldn't be too much of a stretch to also assume that the other subclasses that appeared in those articles would be included as well. This includes the Brute Fighter, which seems very Gruul, and the School of Invention Wizard, whose reckless casting and techno-mechanical armor have all the hallmarks of Izzet aesthetic. This part is much more speculative, but when discussing an adventuring party made using this book, James Wyatt left out the class of the Simic character. This could indicate that there's some sort of Biomancer class that's going to be in the book. And finally, guilds are going to replace the standard backgrounds. This means that characters' skills, ideals, bonds, flaws, and personality traits will all be tied to what guild they're from. In addition to this though, guilds will also give characters contacts in the city, allies, and enemies. And coming up last is the thing we know the least about, the monsters. Whereas the character options had playtest material that was put out for us to speculate on, there isn't much playtest material put out for creatures. All we know for sure is that there are tons of creatures in this book. Jeremy Crawford, one of the lead designers for Dungeons & Dragons, said that there are more monsters in here than in Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes, and they're still trying to squeeze in more. In fact, I'm expecting the monster manual part of this book to take up well over 100 pages. There's just so many different types of creatures on Ravnica, from the classic demons, angels, spirits, and dragons, to the more unique mutants and Krasis. And that's not even mentioning all the art that's available for this section from Magic cards. And I should mention that this book is going to be downright beautiful and worth purchasing just because of the ridiculous amount of art that's available in it. Well, that's all for now. I hope you learned something and that you're just as hyped for this book as I am.